Anyway, yeah, I think President Trump has made some interesting remarks that don't hold up to closer scrutiny. I don't know why he says something that I think most people that know anything at all about nuclear arsenals are well aware that we do not have more nuclear weapons than anybody else in the world. In fact, that's unquestionably Russia. Now, people will get into delivery means and launchers and those other things, but let's just keep it simple. The Russians have the most.
Why would we be testing them? And why would he say immediately when his advisors must be telling him, you can't do this immediately? My research, correct me if yours is different and your understanding is superior to mine, says it takes a couple of years to put into play a test of a nuclear weapon.
Well, first of all, that's probably true. I don't know the exact time frame, but let's keep something in mind. You don't have to test nuclear weapons if you are a developed nuclear power. The people that have an interest in testing are those trying to develop the nuclear weapons. So the bottom line is we know, the Russians know, and the Chinese know that their weapons work. So do the British and the French. So I'm not sure we need to test. And we signed the test ban that was renewed in 1996. I don't know why he would want to unilaterally depart from that. Now, strictly speaking, even though the president signed the treaty, it was never ratified by the Senate. But nevertheless, we've abided by it. It's like a lot of other things that we saw wisdom in following, despite the fact that perhaps others didn't. So I don't understand it. I don't know what he's up to. It doesn't make any sense to me. This is the worst thing I can conceive of at this point. Don't we have enough tension in the world?
Right. And don't we have the need for acquiescence and compatibility and communication with the Russians rather than something like this? Chris, do you have the full screen of what the president said earlier today? The United States has, I'm reading from it, Colonel, the United States has more nuclear weapons than any other country. This was accomplished, including a complete update and renovation of existing weapons during my first term in office. Because of the tremendous destructive power, I, in caps, hated to do it, but had no choice. Russia is second and China is a distant third, but it will be even within 5 years. Because of other countries' testing programs, I've instructed the Department of War to start testing nuclear weapons on an equal basis. That process will begin immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. This is hogwash, isn't it?
Yeah, largely it is. It sounds as though he had an idea, and as usual, he didn't run it by anybody, or if he did, they were afraid to say anything. That's always a possibility. There's one good piece of news that I think, based on his recent experience, he has discovered that unlike money, you can't print missiles. So he now has an understanding that we have a supply deficit in the defense system. In other words, we can't surge and rapidly produce large numbers of missiles. Perhaps that recognition in the back of his mind led him to the conclusion, well, perhaps we ought to test. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It doesn't make sense.
If the Russians have 4,800 and we have 3,400, these things can destroy the earth. Why would anybody need 4,800 and anybody else need 3,400?
No, a friend of mine who met the man who was the key figure in the development of the French nuclear force asked the man who developed the nuclear weapons, how many nuclear warheads do you think you really need? And he said, that's an easy answer. One. He said, one's enough. It's so bad, no one is going to risk it. So who knows?
All right. You and I intended to be speaking on, is President Trump lying us into another war? And I want to talk about Venezuela. But before we do, is he about to lie us into a war with Iran?
Well, that's a good question. Is he backpedaling finally? Is he finally coming to the conclusion that, contrary to his initial claims that he did not successfully end the war between Israel and Iran? Is he being told by the Israelis that they're getting ready to attack? What is it? What's the purpose? I don't know. I mean, we've told so many lies so many times about so many things, it's hard to sort through them. I was just went back before you came on this afternoon, just for my own edification, and reread some of the material on the Gulf of Tonkin Revolution.
Oh, good Lord.
And, that was one big lie. And
Right.
I think what we've been hearing about Venezuela is a big lie. And I think pretty soon people are realizing that we've lied a great deal about Iran. That doesn't seem to matter. And it doesn't seem to matter very much because Congress is not helping the matter. Very few people are raising the issue. I mean, I listened to Senator Rand Paul. He spoke very intelligently on the subject, others from time to time. But on the whole, the notion of checks and balances in this government of three branches, they don't seem to operate, Judge. And so, frankly, whatever the president wants to do, he's going to do.
Chris, do we have Senator Paul with Senator Kaine on one of the Sunday talk shows from last Sunday? Well, Chris is looking for it. The initial part of this is the administration hasn't even briefed the Congress. They haven't even told us what their plans are. They are apparently prepared to just do something. Now, this begins with something from the president, because apparently the host of this show, I don't remember who it is, ran this for Senator Kaine and Senator Paul. And then you'll hear Senator Paul's rather, in my view, and I think yours, articulate response. Chris?
The land is going to be next. And we may go to the Senate, we may go to the, Congress and tell them about it. But I can't imagine they'd have any problem with it. I think they're going to probably like it, except for the radical left lunatics.
All right, so I'll start with you, Senator Paul. What do you need to hear in a briefing? What questions do you have?
It's not so much about a briefing, but we haven't had a briefing. To be clear, we've got no information. I've been invited to no briefing. But a briefing is not enough to overcome the Constitution. The Constitution says that when you go to war, Congress has to vote on it. And during a war, then, there's a lower rules for engagement. People do sometimes get killed without due process. But the drug war or the crime war has typically been something we do through law enforcement. And so far, they have alleged that these people are drug dealers. No one said their name. No one said what evidence. No one said whether they're armed. And we've had no evidence presented. So at this point, I would call them extrajudicial killings. And this is akin to what China does, to Iran does with drug dealers. They summarily execute people without presenting evidence to the public. So it's wrong.
Before you respond, Colonel, Chris, play the clip where the president boasts about we kill people.
And Mr. President, if you are declaring war against these cartels and Congress is likely to approve of that process, why not just ask for a declaration of war?
Well, I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay? We're going to kill them. They're going to be like dead. Okay. Yeah.
Well, it's unfortunate because the truth of the matter is, if he went to the Congress, of course, he'd have to do some groundwork before he went, and simply said, I want a declaration of war against illegal drug trafficking. And that's what I'm going to fight. And I want special permissions, special provisions to do that. I wouldn't be surprised if he was widely supported, Judge. But he hasn't done that. And so all of these attacks are worse than extrajudicial. They're just wanton murder. Now, that doesn't mean that I or you or anybody else wants to protect people in those boats on the grounds that they have a right to move drugs. That's not the point. We don't know who we're killing. We don't know who we've hurt. We are behaving like a drunk, in a glass factory, smashing everything in sight. It's a catastrophe. It's hurting us. It's hurting him. And he should know better.
And it establishes a horrific precedent. I mean, suppose God save us from this, but suppose a President AOC or a President Gavin Newsom wanted to use this power against people who were not arguably involved in crimes, but Trump did it, and the Congress didn't stop him. I mean, this is the way these things happen. President Trump killed General Soleimani. President Obama killed Anwar al-Awlaki. Neither of them was involved in any act of violence at the time. Neither of them had raised a finger against the United States. Neither of them had been accused of a crime, but they both were evaporated by presidential order, just like these guys in the boats. What argument would the president make to justify a naval or air or, God forbid, land invasion of Venezuela? That they're the heartthrob of drug manufacturing and distribution, and therefore we have to wipe out the government of the country?
Well, clearly that's the cover story. That's ultimately being presented to the American public as justification. Because you know, Judge, the American people, you tell most Americans at any given point in time, we're going after drug lords, we're destroying cartels, this man's a drug criminal, everyone will sort of rally around and say, good, go get him. Americans aren't getting all the details. They don't know the whole story. I mean, LBJ, when he decided he wanted to start the war in Vietnam, he lied his way into it, but he had help. He picked up the phone and he called Barry Goldwater, who was the majority leader in the Senate. And he said, I need your support, Barry. I want to go to Vietnam. I want to kill these people, et cetera, et cetera. And Barry Goldwater said, you have my support. So when LBJ went public and he said, we've taken fire and we have to respond, you know, the old story, if we don't respond, it will be appeasement and it will get worse and so forth.
Right.
You know, he got what he wanted. Everybody else lined up. Within a few days, you had the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. And at the time, the interesting part is there was one naval officer, a Navy commander, who was working in the Pentagon. I think he was in the Joint Staff, and he called a couple of offices in the Senate. And he said, he told the people, I don't know what officers these were, but he specifically told the chiefs of staff, this is a lie. There is no incident as outlined. This is not true. This is a lie. Don't support this. And they thanked him, but they did nothing. Wow. And I think that's our problem right now, that frankly, if President Trump goes in there, in fact, I got to take you back to something you taught me. I think it was last year. I asked you what you thought about Congress's failure to exercise its responsibilities. And you told me the Charlie Rangel story.
Right. The Charlie Rangel story is, you know, because I asked him about this while President Obama was using the CIA to bomb and destroy the government of Libya. This was Hillary Clinton's concoction. We saw he died. She made that famous, horrific, morally relativistic statement. And Rangel said, well, you know what? If it's successful, we'll applaud him. And if it's a failure, it's his fault. That's the attitude that many members of Congress will take, Colonel.
Yeah, and yet James Madison made the argument on more than one occasion. The reason the government was set up as it was because they could not be certain that the office of the president would always be in the hands of an enlightened leader.
Right. This is not an enlightened leader, but this person gets to whisper in the president's ear whenever they play golf together, which apparently is a couple times a week. And I don't know if he's recounting what the president has told him, but this is dangerous, treacherous, and dastardly. Chris, cut number 11.
President Trump has decided to treat drug cartels as national security threats. Remember the caliphate, the ISIS caliphate that President Trump destroyed? We have a drug caliphate in our backyard. Venezuela is run by an indicted drug dealer, Maduro, who's not a legitimate president of Venezuela. It's a safe haven for drug cartels. So President Trump has a policy that if you're in the drug business, you're a drug cartel and you're having boats come to America, we're going to blow up the boats. I think his policy is going to go on the land. If you're a country housing drug cartels, we're going to treat you as a national security threat to our country. There is a caliphate in our backyard. Colombia, Venezuela, and Cuba are all countries that have allowed drug cartels to operate with impunity, make money off poisoning America, and these countries should be on notice. With Donald Trump, the game is changing.
Colonel, he is either a lunatic or he is articulating what he believes the president is going to do, a land invasion of Venezuela, Colombia, and Cuba.
Well, let me pay tribute to whoever writes some of his material, because he used this word caliphate. And you may remember that back at the beginning of this century, we were listening to all sorts of people tell us about the emergence of the global caliphate, and that if we did not commit to this endless war against the emerging global caliphate, the whole world would fall into darkness and be ruled by Islamist fanatics. So by using the word caliphate and equating it to drug traffickers, ostensibly in Venezuela, he's going to convince a lot of people in his state and other places that this is something we absolutely must do. So you got to give the man credit for that. Now, having said that, I've been down this road a couple of times and I've watched people commit to action, and then you discover a number of different things. First of all, what do you strike? What are the legitimate military targets that you're going to go after? When we began the Kosovo air campaign, we had roughly 120 legitimate military targets in the entire country of Yugoslavia. Now, stop and consider that for a minute. And that was supposed to be the basis for an air campaign that could go on for months. So what happened? Well, people were told, you better go back and find military targets for us. Well, we don't have any military installations to hit. Well, then you start interpreting things as potentially military or have potential intelligence value or propaganda, and suddenly your target list grows and you hit lots of things that, quite frankly, are irrelevant. You start destroying bridges, you destroy harbors, you destroy all sorts of things because you're desperate to find something to hit before you go in. What do you think the number of legitimate military targets happens to be in Venezuela? I doubt that there are very many there. So you could launch 2 days of strikes and that's it. You're out of business. There's nothing else that you can legitimately hit. But that won't stop us based upon my experience. They'll start finding reasons to hit other things. And now you're talking about going in on the ground. Go in on the ground to do what? Are we going to arrest Maduro? Or do we hope that he's going to be killed by a strike? Are we there to secure the presidential palace for the alleged successor, Mrs. Machado, pending, obviously, an election which the CIA will make sure turns out the right way? I don't know. Again, as Senator Paul said, and Senator Kane, who was in that interview, there's been no briefing, no presentation. At least LBJ called people, and he did tell people on the Senate Armed Services Committee and so forth what he was going to do. They presented no resistance and asked no questions. But the bottom line is at least something happened this time around. He obviously doesn't plan to do anything. And I don't see a throng of congressmen or senators demanding entry to the White House.
One of the websites, I think it was Zero Hedge, reported this afternoon, following up on what Senator Graham said, that the invasion of Venezuela was imminent. And the president tweeted, we're not going to invade Venezuela. Well, who would believe that? We have 10,000 Marines there. We have the largest aircraft carrier in the world there. The aircraft carrier has numerous other naval vessels to support it. You understand this far better than I. What are they doing there if we're not going to invade?
Well, I don't think the aircraft carrier battle group is there yet. They're steaming in that direction. It could be that because of the weather, the hurricanes in the Caribbean and in that region, they may have been delayed. But I doubt seriously they will launch any significant operation against Venezuela until that entire naval battle group has arrived. The other thing is you have 10,000 troops, but they're army. And they're sitting up there in Puerto Rico. Ostensibly, they'll be flown and perhaps they'll parachute into Venezuela. I have no idea. You have about 2,500 to 3,000 Marines offshore with the flotilla that's already offshore from the Navy. There's several thousand sailors, obviously. We have F-35 jets parked on runways. We have bombers ready to go. I mean, clearly, if we want to go into Venezuela, there's very little the Venezuelan military can do to stop us. The question is, again, for what purpose? And we've not been told that, because if you bring up regime change, everybody says, oh, no, that's not what it's about. Oh, so we're just going to bomb in and around the neighborhood where our friend Maduro lives. And once he sees that we're on the ground, he's going to come out, welcome us, and sign an agreement or something. I mean, the whole thing is crazy.
It is. It is. Before we go, Colonel, this is going to sound a little off the wall, but Stephen Miller is the president's principal advisor on everything from military strikes to the Department of Justice to Homeland Security to ICE. He's a personal advisor to the president. He's not nominated and confirmed by the Senate. The position doesn't require Senate confirmation. Where does he live?
Well, first of all, I don't know, but if I did, I wouldn't mention it on the air. I mean, I've had death threats. A lot of people in Washington have had death threats, and I wouldn't be surprised if people in this administration aren't seriously concerned. And so they may have decided it's much easier to protect the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, and other key members of the administration by placing them on the reservation at Fort McNair or across the river.
Is it unusual for senior administration officials to be residing in officers' quarters?
Yes,
in military installations.
Yes, yeah. When Secretary Perry, for instance, was Secretary of Defense, he rented a townhome that faced the river in Old Town Alexandria, and was picked up there every morning and driven to the building. So yeah, it is unusual, but we don't know what else is happening. And we've got serious problems right now financially speaking. I mean, we have 47 million people on food stamps, and we have a government that's shut down. People are already privately saying, we can't do this very long. If this gets worse, there could be serious unrest in the United States. We have a lot of people inside the United States who are very well organized in ways that have not been the case in the past, whether it's Antifa or a number of front organizations are also very well funded. And we saw Antifa show up at Tucker Carlson's home in Washington, D.C. That was a very frightening experience for his wife and family. That could happen. And under the circumstances, we probably don't have enough police or Secret Service. So I'm not really surprised. It's disturbing, but it's not without reason, Judge.
Thank you, Colonel. Colonel, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for your willingness late in the day on a Friday to address these difficult issues. Thank you for your double duty. Now will you go off and join the Druids?
I will. I'm getting my robes ready as we speak. And by the way, we're getting a big bonfire and so forth. But I wanted to share something I read that I thought perfectly describes our situation in Washington. I guess this was 2 years ago, and Jerome Powell, when he was the Fed chair, was being questioned. He got very frustrated, and he looked out at the audience when they began asking questions about long-term predictions and anticipated changes in interest rates, so forth. He said, well, frequently we have to navigate under cloudy skies. Well, I would say we are navigating under extremely dense cloud cover right now, because I just don't believe anybody really knows what the hell they're doing.